Well, I was going to tell you about these times we're living in. Now, you know, I'm the oldest one here. I was born in 91.
Yeah.
So, you know, if I remembered things what happened about 8 years ago, that's quite a while, over 85 years. And when we see them changes, like all of us do, you wouldn't hardly believe if our folks could wake up and see what's going on now, they would see they were in a different world. And you know, this leads me to think, like there's a scripture that says, in the last days, knowledge shall be increased. Well, you know, when you figure what did they have before 1891 when I was born, they didn't have much. In fact, I read an article one time that the patent officer in Washington, D.C., in 1856, you know, he resigned. He said
Everything was invented.
everything was already invented, you know. So they got that letter up in Washington now yet, you know, in 1856. Boy, that was 40 years before I was born. And they had everything, and when we were young, they didn't have nothing yet. But that shows that we're living in times that, in the most
Yeah.
changing times that there ever was.
But I'll tell
For
you,
a few years.
you know, Elwood Richardson, you know, he's a cousin to my ma. You know, he used to be in the bank in Clayton. He's down in Hoover's time now. They was letting a lot of farms go. They had 100 farms and they was letting them go for little or nothing, trying to get out of the farm business. And he was telling, he says, we went just as far as we can go. There's enough hotels, there's enough roads, there's enough railroads, and the logging business is all done. See, they started up in the logging business. We're at the end of the rope, he says, right now. Boy, we improved quite a bit since 1932.
They sure don't think that. They don't think that way anymore. They're going through
No, you
hotels.
see, this world is millions and millions of years old, trillions and trillions. You dig a gravel pit, you see a layer every few,
Yeah.
well, where it was down there. You know, we might not be at the end of our rope yet. We just got to learn, we're just learning something, that's all.
Might be.
Yeah,
Now they gotta start getting, some of these guys that are setting fires all the time, burning everything up.
You see, the human race is a pretty strong thing. If we'd breed cattle like people are breeding,
yeah.
we'd be out of milk in another
Yeah.
6 months.
Yeah.
My dad says when he first come to Minnesota, southern Minnesota there, it was all prairie, you know,
Yeah,
nothing plowed.
yeah,
And he remembers as a boy where the city of Wells is now,
yeah.
it's just all muskrat houses.
Yeah.
It was a swamp. And land down there then was $1 an acre.
Yeah.
Just think of it, if you had saved up $160, you could buy a quarter section of land. And now, it's around $3,500 an acre.
Yeah, and my
What they get.
grand,
Just think of it.
my granddad come into this country and, you know, I got a receipt where it wasn't even the town of Clayton. There wasn't even a road. The first road is, that they cut out was from down there, by the corner of Lincoln, you know, on J. Come up to the corner north to Olson's. I can remember when I was a kid, there was even grass in the tracks over when you got past them rice straws. There were just 2 tracks, you remember? Where and a single horse went in the middle there, and there was grass between the 2 tracks, and you know, after you get to the rice straws.
And you're not so old yet.
No, I'm only 79.
Yeah.
You know, he's too young to be here today. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I'm the youngest one.
Yeah,
I'm the kid.
he remembers good.
Lily and I, she's a month older than I
Well,
am.
my
I was
dad-
86 the other day.
Must be. Yeah.
I tell you, we had a good year in there. Arnold and Amy, you know, they're 60 days older than I am. They was born January, and Lily was born
In
in
February.
February, and
Yeah.
Myrtle Tenman and I in March.
Yeah, that's right.
And boy, I tell you, they was making money that year.
There's only few of you left though, even regardless
Yeah,
of, you
yeah.
see, there's
Yeah, Arnold
Myrtle
Name.
and
Myrtle's
Arnold
dead.
and you, yeah, Myrtle is.
Yeah, Little's
Just
passed away.
think of Art Erickson.
Well, Arthur, he was older, Victor, they're old,
When did you come, when did your folks move there, to your place then? I mean, Oxford.
My folks, my dad bought that piece of land about, I think it was in '92.
Oh,
But
Uh-huh.
then we had those bad years, you know, during the
Yeah.
Cleveland administration. And he had a big team of horses, and he was doing draying in the city, St. Paul. But everything petered out, you know, people quit doing everything because of the Democrats being in power. The Republicans rebelled, they were
Yeah.
doing
That's
it.
right, they took the
And-
money out, you know.
Yeah, so then everything was going haywire, and there wasn't enough drain to be done to pay for the feed
Yeah,
for the
that's,
horses.
Sure,
So
that's
mother had some money saved. She'd been doing housework, and that was for several years. And she had saved up some money, and she kept on keeping the thing going for Dad with the horses for a while. But finally decided that was no good. They'd have to move out here where he had this piece of land.
Oh,
He
yeah.
had bought this land. Well, it was kind of on a contract. It was railroad land. And he had paid some then, of course, but I don't think he had it all paid for in, that was in '96 I was born. Well, then, when I was 11 months old, they moved out to the town of Clayton here, and
Oh,
we
yeah.
stayed over to Renanders that first winter.
Oh,
lived,
yeah.
lived there that winter. And
Well.
then, of course, in the spring, they moved out here. He had bought, and there was a house on that Swanson place,
Oh,
you know, that belonged to either Mrs. Isaac Johnson's folks or Isaac Johnson's. I don't know which it was, but I guess they died, and they took this house and sold it, and so Dad bought that house and moved it down where we live now. And that is part of our house yet. There's one room that dining room part, and then there was a kitchen, and they took that off and then built another kitchen a few years afterwards, and so on. So they built up gradually. And I was 11 months old when they moved out here to the town of Clayton,
Where was that from?
St. Paul.
Hmm.
But then everything was at a standstill in the city, say,
Well, that's-
no work or nothing, it's just
Yeah.
like it's getting to be.
people going along the road, they call them tramps, you know,
Yeah.
but there's people out of work, and I suppose they got out where they could stop in. You can remember that when people used
Oh,
to come
yeah.
along
I know.
all the
Yeah,
time.
those-
That was in Cleveland's time when you.
Yeah.
Cleveland.
I
Yeah.
remember Dad talking about that. He says, he was always, he never would vote Democrat, my dad.
My dad too.
But because he says, I'll tell you, we went through that once.
Yeah,
Because
but,
they had just started farming down there, you know, in Minnesota, southern Minnesota.
but you know, Henry, if they'd have went on the Bryan's plan, and, you know, them old fellas, they thought if they'd inflate the money, there'd be $1. I had some of this, it's up to the museum in Balsam Lake.
Shin
They
blast.
called it Bryan's money, see?
Yeah.
Oh,
They talked about inflation, and them old fellas, they thought that $1 would be, well, it was about this big around, they figured, but the Republicans
remember my
scared
dad,
the
he
Democrats, they figured they'd have to take a wheelbarrow to wheel the money to town and get a bunch of groceries, and they pictured $1 out about as big as a plate, and them old fellas, they didn't know any more about inflation than anybody.
Then when you
My old Sam cat.
Well,
They
this-
figured that $1 would be as big around as a plate, and they didn't want to have to carry money around like
Yeah,
that.
well, this
They
is,
thought that was inflation. They'd make a big dollar.
well, this is what happened, you know, the Republicans had been in before.
When
And
it,
in Cleveland, that was about the first Democrat to come
Yeah.
in there, and the Republicans had the money. They were the
it was
ones-
just like Truman, he
Yeah.
was in there, and they had a
And then
Republican Congress, and
When Cleveland got in, Dad says then the Republicans drew out all the money, and
yeah, they made us a doggone hard.
Dad said they raised flax, you know, and you trash. Now that was the new ground. The first thing they put flax, because there was no wheat, you know, because
Yeah.
they plowed. And flax, they figured was a good crop. You'd go to town, he said, with a load of flax, There's no money there. They wouldn't give you no money.
Potatoes,
Say-
5 cents a
Yeah.
bushel.
They'd give you a piece of paper, and he'd write on what
You'll
this
get
flax
it.
was worth, you know. Then you took that paper to the grocery store, and then he'd give you your groceries, and then he'd mark on
Get to listen
how
to
much
it.
the
Script.
groceries were. But then he had them big, what he called shin plasters, they called them.
Yeah, yeah.
Big Democrats that tried to make money themselves, you know,
Yeah.
I suppose. Oh, he said, they had the worst times. He said, no money, you couldn't get no money or nothing.
Oh,
Well,
I tell you,
that's
they've
what-
had such hard times, them old fellas, if they'd happen to get their taxes paid in a new pair of overalls, by the time they thought they was making money.
That's right, there was no money around.